And why I was supposed to be there very quickly revealed itself because, as it turns out, David Wilcock is very, very deeply into the law of one. So much so that he said back in 1996 that he had read at that time about 300 books and he considered himself to be a rather advanced scholar. But when he came across the law of one, he said that that was such a out there mind-blowing experience that it just put into a rather limited perspective everything that he thought that he knew. And so he was so taken in by it that he went to the source, which is L&L Research in Louisville, Kentucky, and spent a year and a half in studying the law of one. And so it was quickly revealed to me why I was supposed to be there, because he used the law of one as the basic cornerstone for his 5 or 6 week course. And in so doing, it completely turned me around. My view of David Wilcock's shift 180 degrees. Yours might too, if you have an experience like that.
Well, I have read his book, The Source Code Investigations. There's a lot of good material in that isn't really coming from his intuition or anything like that. He's just doing research and piecing it together. I didn't like a lot of the Q stuff that he got into, and I didn't like when he was crying on Coast to Coast about an attempt on his life and that he thinks he's the reincarnated Edgar Cayce. But look, even a subpar messenger is capable of finding and regurgitating a respectable and truthful message, especially when you go through so many different ones. So I would rather focus on the message than the messenger.
Right, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Amen. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
And I've subscribed to that ever since the missing information began coming to me way back in 1990. And I think
yes.
I was I think I subscribed to that well before that too, or I would have thrown Leonard Orr out.
Fair. Yes, the message is more important. And I know people might even consider me hypocritical for saying this, that I prefer David Icke a lot more than David Wilcock. But as for the moons, again, you cite David Icke, and he has said that the moon is the reptilians' control center. You quote him saying, "The reptilians are broadcasting a false reality from the moon that humans are decoding into what they think is a physical world. It is a vibrational digital construct, the same as the reality portrayed in the Matrix movies. The theory is that this is a very aggressive form of mind control that they have been beaming at us in order to keep us fear-based, thus inhibiting our collective spiritual growth." Well, it does seem pretty hard to ascend with that sort of obstacle in our way.
Yeah, it does, don't it? And then there's the thing is just because David Icke says it doesn't mean every single word of it is true. Right. And so, the very best of the researchers, I would give them, they're somewhere between 70 and 80% accurate. And so I don't think they're trying to mislead us. I think that most of them, if not all of them, are doing the very best they can. I'll give them that. But just because I quoted David Icke in my book doesn't mean that I verbatim believe every single word of what he said there.
Right.
I'm just putting it in there to you might say deepen the discussion a little bit.
Well, his Saturn Moon Matrix stuff was really, really fascinating to me. And it does go back to Tesla's quote about vibration, frequency, and energy. And if there is a way to create some all-encompassing system that broadcasts negativity on the Earth, well, I think that would have been done at some point. And then you get into the black cube. Like, what is the black cube all about? It's obviously peppered throughout our whole civilization. It's peppered in pop culture and religions. It seems to be the symbol of Saturn. So I'm very much into that kind of stuff. I consider that pretty deep and pretty high level, very much out there. But when you're folding in this idea of a negative weaponized vibration just blasting us all the time, and that our real goal is to ascend to this fourth density light being experience, well, I don't know. I think that's a a perspective I've incorporated. I found a way to build that into my general worldview. The question is, how do we ascend with such a epic cosmic weapon? Do we have to disable that before the galactic time wave comes? I mean, how do you work that out?
Well, I'd say again, Greg, that first of all, buying into every aspect of that is optional. Maybe parts of it are true, maybe all of it's true, maybe none of it's true. I don't know. I don't know. But I do know that there is negativity out there. And to continue with the story of going back to the ancient builder race and
Yes.
how they were able to keep the peace for 2 billion years, they did it through uh, uh, well, if you look at Star Wars in the original trilogy, the very first of the Star Wars movies was we had Darth Vader and the Death Star. So, as I suggested earlier, George Lucas likely was being given inside information from the secret space program, because it's common knowledge throughout the secret space program that, as fantastic as it might sound, that one of the techniques that the ancient builder race used to keep the peace for 2 billion years was they developed the technology, the ability, you might say, to hollow out moons, to create their version of a Death Star, only it was not used to conquer other worlds. It was used to keep the peace. And as I say, it worked for about 2 billion years until about 500 million years ago, the beings from Maldek, that was a planet that is no longer in our solar system. It's the asteroid belt between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. But back in the day, it was a planet, a giant planet, also known as Tiamat. But for whatever reason, the beings on Maldek became infused with negativity, and they took over these, if you will, hollowed out peacekeeping moons and began to use them for offensive purposes to go out and conquer other worlds. And they weren't quite as smart as they thought they were, however, because the what, as I recall, what they were trying to do was cause the sun of the, if you will, enemies in the enemy solar system to go supernova and therefore explode their planet. But they timed it wrong, about as bad a timing as you could get, because what it caused was our sun to do a supernova type thing and completely destroy Maldek. And so, uh, uh, but that was the introduction of negativity, where the Draco reptilians and other not so nice beings began to appear in our solar system, in our 52 star cluster, and things actually began to go downhill from there on. So the negativity has been going on for, you could say, then about 500 million years throughout our local 52 star cluster. And oh, goodness sakes, the beings from Maldek, they're known as the progenitor race. Before all this happened, they established a colony on Earth, again in Antarctica, which was a completely different place at the time. And then when their planet was destroyed, certainly they were not prepared for it. Many of them were able to hijack our moon, which was not only hollowed out, but also one of the premier examples of this sort of a Death Star technology that originally was not a Death Star, but used for benevolent purposes. And many of them, many millions of them, were able to live inside the moon. They say, the law of one says, and the secret space program says, for a period of about 450,000 years. And so evidently inside of the moon is not what we think it is. The moon is indeed hollow, if you're to accept this, and it is not only quite livable, but it was also used back in the day because of its capability of, if you will, packaging up entire planets and moving them to more habitable areas of space. If their area of space was about to be consumed by a solar flash, which consumes everything, including the planets, then that's another thing that the ancient builder race was capable of doing. packaging up the entire planet within the interiors of the moon or other hollowed out moons and take them to a more reasonable place where they could begin to uh, work out their karmic debts. I mean, this just goes on and on and on. And if it sounds like a Star Wars movie, because it couldn't possibly be true, uh, I will again confirm that this is very detailed in the Law of One. It is also common knowledge throughout the secret space program. And your good friend, David Wilcock, confirms it because all of his sources are saying the same thing. Now, one thing about Wilcock, which you may or may not like, which you may or may not accept, is that he's had many insiders come to him. I could name names. Pete Peterson was one of the first, gave him plenty of detailed information. Lots of other insiders, one of whom said that in his version of the military-industrial complex, they were able to get inside the moon, he said, on 6 different occasions. And he said inside the moon, it's absolutely amazing. The control panels that go on for miles and miles and miles, and all the livable space. No, the inside of the moon is not at all what we think it is. So this story just goes on and on and on. And I do cover all the details in my book. And I just don't know if we can get there in the time that we have left. Well, we'll do the best we can.
Yes. And let me say this. So we know that the cabal, the elite, they're very crafty and they really do want to cause us to waste our lives, whether it's sitting in front of the television or scrolling social media, many different mechanisms. They want us to be fighting with each other and they want us to be stuck in mental cul-de-sacs because we only have roughly 90 to 100 years and the clock is ticking. So the more they can suck up our energy and attention, the better, because then we're not focusing on creating multi-generational wealth for our own families. We're not really focused on figuring out how to beat them or truly compete with them. So when I hear a story this epic, I like it. I'm interested in it. But I could also envision a possibility where the cabal sees a guy like David Wilcock. He's been on the scene for many years. And they say, you know, all we have to do to kick off this yarn about this, that, and the other, and the moons and Maldek and the ancient builder races, send him 10 guys. Send him 10 in the club military men to concoct a story. Wilcock will regurgitate it. And then you have this little container for a red herring that sends people off in all kinds of directions, wastes a lot of their time, and doesn't do much to address what life is really about, how to defeat the cabal. You know, it's a distraction. Is this not the same kind of distraction as Star Wars itself, as Disney itself?
Greg, what you're saying is certainly a possibility. And if David Wilcock was my only source, I would say that my book belongs in one place, and that's the trash can. But you want to tell me that the cabal? You want to tell me that the cabal was also able to infiltrate all the ET races who were coming back in the 1950s, telling us of the galactic superwave that's coming in and how it's going to impact everyone and everything. You want to tell me that they were able to impact 35 different cultures and what they all say about the ascension. You want to tell me that they were able to impact the ancient builder race and the raw material in the writing of the Law of One that goes into great detail in all of this. So
those are better sources. I like those sources. But those 35 other cultures.
Okay, then you'll be glad to know that I drew upon all of these different sources. David Wilcock was only one of many, many, many others.
Fair, but
so
those
can we put that
35
to rest,
cultures,
please?
Yes, I would love to not bring up Wilcock again, but this stuff about the moons, I don't know if that's in the 35 other cultures.
Well, you better include David Icke on that one too. I don't know if it's in the other 35 cultures either. And I'm not laying it out as though this is absolute truth. So let's learn to read between the lines a little bit, if you will, and use some discernment. Skepticism is great to a certain point, but like anything, it can be carried too far. And I think that you might be going a little bit off the deep end with it in this current uh, uh, with your current suggestions here. Although I do agree absolutely that David Wilcock absolutely could be an unwitting pawn of the cabal. No question about that. That's
Right.
why you have to have a very astute BS meter.
But
So
I
the
do
thing that
like
I
what you're saying.
balance about David Wilcock is his knowledge of the law of one. That's what's really true for me with regard to David Wilcock and how he
Fair.
brings that out.
Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1 hour interviews, you get the full 2 hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to the highersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right.
The Higherside Chat Show. Greg Carwood.